Some lessons in life are a lot easier to learn than others. It doesn't take much to convince you that you shouldn't touch a hot stove, or that eating yellow snow has immediate bad consequences.
That's not lemon!
But hard truths are different. If you don't learn them, you can end up making the same mistake over and over again, almost like you have a glitch in your operating system. Now, hard truths are probably more difficult to learn because you need to change your existing beliefs. You need to change the way you see the world to accept a hard truth. That in its very nature is exactly why they are hard truths. It's why they are hard lessons to learn. So every time I learn one of these uncomfortable truths about how the world works, I write it down in a spreadsheet. And in this video, I'm going to share with you all the hard truths that I've learned which have helped me fix those glitches in my operating system, and hopefully they'll do the same for you. And the first is that people don't care what you do, they care what you can do for them. Now, almost every person you come across is going to share this sentiment, whether that's in business, whether that's a friendship or a relationship. People are always looking for value exchange from others. Sure, we might not be thinking exactly what can this person do for me, but we're thinking, how can this person benefit my life? Could they become a good friend, a potential partner you could settle down with? Is it someone you could learn from? Could they eventually become your boss or even a client you could work with? So that first hard truth is that people don't care what it is that you do. What they fundamentally care about is how you can help them get what they want in their lives. And this doesn't have to feel sleazy. You just gotta know that there is a value exchange with everyone. The second hard truth is that your family and friends often don't want what is best for you. What they want is for you to be safe. Now, this is especially true for close family and friends that you've grown up with, because they know a past version of you. And most people don't like the idea of you changing for a couple reasons. The first is that it makes them uncomfortable with their own lack of growth. And the second is that change is uncertain, and uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. So making any form of change is associated with fear and danger. And this is completely okay. It's not like these people are intentionally trying to harm you, but you need to realize that a lot of the time they will have a bias towards you staying in a safe place, in a safe zone, somewhere where you will not grow as much as you potentially can. You just need to be aware that your friends from childhood and your family are probably a little bit biased whenever you're asking for advice or you're making a decision. The most important thing is to not let their fear, their need for you to be safe, hold you back. And if making one of those changes that improves your life and makes them feel uncomfortable ultimately drives them away, it's probably a good thing. In my experience, the kind of people who actually want what's best for you are the kind of people who are also on a mission, the kind of people who are ambitious and continue to grow. Those are the people it's much easier to relate to, and they can accept that changing and growing is a part of life. The next is that everything seems so obvious in hindsight. Now, this is a phenomenon called the hindsight bias, and all it means is that everything seems way more obvious in hindsight. Once the event has happened, it's so easy to say, oh, I should have predicted that this would have happened. But it's completely pointless to dwell on past decisions because they now seem obvious. Instead of dwelling on those past decisions, the best use of your time is to figure out what actually led you to making that decision in the first place. If you can figure out how you came to a point where you made that decision, then you can change that form of thinking. But you're unlikely to be able to improve your ability to predict the future, because ultimately the future is very difficult to predict. So instead, just focus on working on your own decision making and not try continue to predict the future and beat yourself up for not knowing how something is going to turn out. The next hard truth is that if you are unsure, you already know. Derek Sivers wrote a whole book on this topic, and if it's not a hell yeah, then it's probably a no. Whenever you're trying to make a decision and you're unsure on it, it's probably a good sign that you're trying to convince yourself. And if you need to convince yourself, there's a high chance that you'll end up regretting that decision. The best things are always obvious, and what's important here is that they're not always obvious straight away. Maybe a decision is a no today, but if that question comes back up in 3 months' time, then it might be an obvious yes. The best things to do always become incredibly obvious at the time, but it takes a little bit of time before they become obvious. If you have to convince yourself that something is right, the chances are it's probably the wrong decision. Just as a general rule in life, your gut is probably right. If you're unsure on something, then you already know the answer. Now, this next hard truth is one that took me a long time to understand, and that is that you can make a good decision and the outcome be bad. This doesn't mean that the decision was bad. You just need to separate the process of making a decision and the outcome of that decision. And the best way to do this is to focus on making decisions that have a relatively limited downside. So if something goes wrong, Let's make sure that that is not a huge thing that can go wrong, and the upside is potentially huge. Let's say you start lifting weights. Ultimately, that's probably a good decision because it's going to improve your mood, it'll improve your energy and overall longevity. But maybe a couple weeks in, you end up getting injured. That is a bad outcome, but it doesn't mean that that decision to start exercising, to start lifting weights was a bad decision. And if you zoom out and continue to lift weights over a long period of time once you come back from that injury, it's ultimately going to be a good decision. So remember that you can make a good decision and the outcome can be bad. Just because something doesn't turn out the way you want it to doesn't mean that your decision was actually the thing you did wrong. Now this next one is something that is so easy to miss, and that is that it takes hard work to make anything look easy. Making products that are easy to use, videos that are easy to watch, or writing that is easy to read is the most difficult thing to do. There's this quote that's attributed to a bunch of different people that if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. And that's because making something simple, making something shorter, is meticulous hard work. Often the best work feels like you could have done it yourself because it just makes sense and it's just simple. Like when you use a really well-designed product, let's say Apple Notes, you don't have a huge learning curve to using Apple Notes because it just makes sense, it's intuitive. Or when you read a great book, often it's not using complex words and complex sentences. Most of the time, the best work uses the simplest words and the simplest sentences to explain complex ideas. And again, this level of simplicity requires the creator to reach a level of mastery which then makes everything look easy, but it is so difficult to get to that point. Now, this final hard truth to learn is that happiness is less about external pleasures, it's about finding internal pleasure in the pursuit of something. When we think about happiness, it's typically in the form of an external pleasure, whether that's video games, food, sex, or watching a good Netflix series. These things do not lead to happiness, a deep sense of fulfillment. External pleasures alone lead to a sense of shallow happiness. You end up happy in the moment while the dopamine's flowing, but once that dopamine's gone, you end up feeling a little bit hollow inside. Now, being deeply, truly happy takes something a little bit different to those external pleasures, and it comes in the form of finding internal pleasure in the pursuit of something, and it's when the act of doing the thing becomes the reward. Happiness is found when sitting down to work on that business idea, or spending time learning a new skill, or pushing your body physically become the thing that you enjoy. And when you have these infinite games, these never-ending pursuits to improve your life, that's when you feel like you have a sense of purpose. As I mentioned earlier, I like collecting these mental frameworks for improving my thinking, so if you have any others that you recommend, then just drop them in the comments.